Well, good evening and welcome to one of my favorite ways to spend an hour or so sitting around and dishing with a good friend. I'm Lynn Sherr, and I have had the great good fortune to know and to giggle with and to dine with and just commiserate with my pal, the woman you know as the Barefoot Contessa. Please welcome Ina Garten. Hi, Ina.
Hi, hi, Lynn. Always good to see you.
So,
We
Ina,
have had some good times.
we have indeed. So, Ina, what's new?
Oh, nothing, just writing a book, hanging out at home.
I would say writing a book is a big piece of it, but let's get specific. And I would say to you, Ina, my dear friend, that we would have to stop. We really ought to stop meeting like this. But the truth is, I love our conversations at your house and at my house, and especially when we can share them with the folks who love you through your books and your TV shows and your social media. And now, of course, through your amazingly candid and wise and funny new memoir, Be Ready When the Luck Happens. I have to say, congratulations to you. And I'm going to read this so I get it right. Number one New York Times bestseller, named one of the best nonfiction books of the year, sold out the Kennedy Center twice this fall, once with Ann Patchett, once with John Grisham. The publisher has just gone back to press for another 50,000 copies. So congratulations to you. But seriously, you didn't think anybody would care?
I, I really didn't think anybody would care.
Why
It's one
not?
of the great surprises of my life.
This is your first non-cookbook in this
Yes.
part of your life. Earlier in your life, you wrote things that weren't cookbooks, certainly. But what what made you think no, but your life was just not going to be of interest to anyone?
Well, we all kind of live our lives. We do this and then we do something else and we do something else, and it just goes along. And when I was approached about um, doing a memoir, I just thought, what's all that interesting about it? I mean, I've lived it and I never looked back. But what turned out to be the most interesting thing I've done is look back and connect the dots from what I'd done, and it seemed without really looking at it carefully, it seemed chaotic. I threw something away and I did something else, but it turned out they were all connected, and I really didn't realize it. And that
And
one thing built on the next, built on the next, and writing the book has really taught me that, which was stunning.
they're connected by an extraordinary thing. I am so struck reading the book. I was so struck by a word that by definition kept coming up page after page. And that word is timing.
Uh,
Timing.
yeah,
I know you did not orchestrate an awful lot of your life. You did not orchestrate that chance meeting with Jeffrey at
right,
Dartmouth College,
right,
although you did put
exactly.
the little bow in your hair or whatever you had. You did make sure you looked really cute that day. Uh, you didn't orchestrate the store ad in the newspaper. You didn't
Right.
orchestrate the public clamor for specialty foods, but you sure played it well. And I think your title captures it so perfectly. There's luck and there's being ready for the luck. Give
Yeah.
us the big picture. How do you get ready for the luck?
Well, it kind of started to gel for me while I was writing the memoir when 60 Minutes did a piece, and Sharon Alfonsi said to me, everybody thinks you're just walking around with a cosmopolitan in your hand having a great time, but you did a lot of work. And I was just struck by it because I really didn't think of it as work. I did things that I love doing. I taught myself how to cook. I renovated old buildings. I love redoing old houses. I negotiated loans with the bank. I did a lot of things just for fun that ended up being really useful in my work.
I have
So
to say, could I just interrupt? I don't think
yeah.
negotiating a loan with a bank sounds like much fun.
Oh, that sounds great. Great to me. They're going to give me money and I can do whatever I want with it.
That's as
It
much fun
sounds
as
really
cooking.
good.
That's as much fun as cooking.
Yeah, it really is. And I love
Hmm.
renting. I love a challenge, and getting a bank to lend me more money than they think I should have is a really good challenge.
Okay.
Um, I so I think what happened was I I was really lucky, but I realized in writing the book that I actually was ready. when the specialty food business took off, I was lucky to be in the specialty food business. When cookbooks took off, I was lucky to be in that business. When Food Network took off, I was lucky. But at each stage, I was really kind of ready for it in a way that I didn't expect. And the title came from actually late in writing the book. My friend Rob Marshall, who's a Hollywood director, Chicago, Mary Poppins Returns, lots of great movies, said when he was 24 and he was a dance captain of a Liza Minnelli show on Broadway, she said to him, "Be ready when the luck happens," which means do the work, really know your stuff. And then when some great opportunity comes along, you're ready for it. And I realized in looking back, that's actually what happened to me. Whereas I always thought I was just lucky.
You're telling that story also it touches on another thing that I've always noticed about you, which is so much of your success, so much of your life, the way you spend your time is built not only on hard work and pure guts, but on telling stories, on simply telling stories. There's a rhythm to it all, a clear sense that you're part of it. And your being part of it is very much part of why it's important. It's not just food, it's your interest in it and your love for it and your concern for how we consume it and how we feel about it. I wonder if growing up or if in your young adulthood or when you started doing all this, did you and do you think of yourself as a storyteller?
No, I think you're touching on something that's really important to me is that I think of myself as somebody who cares about the user. It's what Silicon Valley calls the user experience. If I'm writing a recipe, I'm not writing a recipe for myself. I'm writing a recipe for somebody to use it. So I want to watch how somebody uses it. I want to know what they know and what they'd like to know in order to make a recipe. So I think that's really important to me. And when I had a specialty food store, I didn't just make things I liked. I made things that I thought customers would like and things that they could take home and they would be delicious tomorrow. So a cake would have to be so good and so moist that when you took it home tomorrow and served it the next day, it was even more delicious the next day. So I'm always aware of like how somebody uses what I'm doing.
But you see, there you are again. You're telling the story. You're putting yourself into it. When you open your the Barefoot Contessa show, you're walking along the beach. It's you being part of it.
Oh, that's interesting. That's true.
And you start every episode with we're in the
My
middle.
friends are coming. Yeah.
Yeah. You're in the middle. You're already halfway there or partway there. And storytelling is something that we care about in our world very much.
And what you do as a journalist,
and that's what
it's
I do
all about story. It's
right.
all about storytelling. That's interesting because that's what people connect with, isn't it? I hadn't thought of it, but I think you're right. Yeah. And actually, one of the things that's interesting is when I started to write cookbooks, I remember saying to my editor, "Well, we need to find somebody to write them." Because all I'd ever written was a nuclear energy policy paper, and nobody was interested in that. And he said, "No, you're going to write it." And I was just like, "Whoa, okay." And what I did very quickly is I didn't want to talk about recipes in the text. I wanted to talk about how to use what you're going to make. So it was the story of how to use it as entertaining. What's the best way to greet people when they come to the door? What's the best way to seat people at a table? So you're right. I didn't think of it as storytelling, but you're absolutely right. It is. Thank you.
Another thing that really resonates throughout the book, and I might add throughout your life, is abundance. And it's a tricky word. I don't mean too much of anything, but I love the story. And will you tell it about the lemons at the store, about how many you're supposed to put out and how many people will buy? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I'm not sure I know what you're talking about, but I do know what you're thinking about is if you, I always refer to it as like muffins. If you put out one muffin or I remember Dean and DeLuca used to have a cake stand with one blueberry muffin, one bran muffin, one, coffee cake muffin and a glass over it. I always knew I would have a big basket of muffins, and there would be 40 muffins in that basket, and when it got down to one or two, nobody would buy them anymore. So you had to fill it up.
Right.
So I always thought you had to have too many muffins so it looked exuberant and abundant, and it makes it much more appealing.
And that's the way it is at your house. I will let all of our wonderful the people joining us on this webinar here to see you in on what it's like to have dinner at Ina's, which is there's never just enough food.
Never.
Never. If there are four of you, there are not four chicken breasts. Or not like when I first moved to New York and my roommates and I had zero money and we would have a dinner party. And if we had six people, there were 6 pieces of lamb, period. That was it. That's not what it is at Ina's house. And it's not that it's too much. It's just, it makes you feel warm and welcome. And it's there just in case. What's that about?
I just think it makes people feel welcome. And like, I want to take care of them. There's always enough if you want more. And you might not want more, but that doesn't really matter. I just think there should always be a little too much.
Is it about luxury?
Yeah, I think that's probably what it is about. And I think probably it came from my mother's cooking was very minimal and cool, and everything about her was kind of cold. And I think it's just warm. If you have too many cookies, you serve too many cookies, then people feel like, oh, it's like a treat. It's like a party. That's what it is.
Well, funny you should mention your mother, because I was just about to make that turn. There's a kind of sad irony in your story of your life. You make people feel really good about what they eat, how they live. You've even got your own Spotify list to make the sound perfect, the music perfect when you're having a dinner party. But you surely, growing up, have had your share of not feeling good, of facing up to some very difficult times as a child, as an adult. How difficult was it for you to write about your fraught relationship with your parents?
I wrote about it not because it was so horrible. I mean, certainly people have had worse childhoods than I've had. I wrote about it because it was so cold and lonely and sad. And I just wanted people to know that you can make a really clear determination. I don't want to live this way, that my childhood is not going to be the story of my life. And so when I was 15, I made that decision that I was going to live my life completely differently from the way my parents lived. And I did. I think it's very easy to fall back into relationships that feel comfortable because those are the relationships you had as a kid. But I just made a clear determination I was going to do it differently. And I did.
You make it very clear in the book. Your father was not abusive in any kind of a sexual way. There was not.
Right.
It was not, as you say, nearly as bad as it certainly could have been, but it wasn't pleasant. And your mom certainly didn't make the kitchen much fun.
No, no. I think my mother, we would look back now and say my mother probably had Asperger's, that she didn't know how to have a relationship. And she took no pleasure in anything. I mean, I would go into the kitchen and try and cook with her, and she would be like, "Oh, just do it, just get it done." And I'd be like, "No, I want to take the stem out of the strawberry so that it's the hull comes with it." And she was like, "Oh, just lop the top off." I'd be like, "No, that's not the right." I was 12 and I knew it wasn't the right way to do it. I want to do things that are pleasurable and fun. And it's exactly the opposite of the way I was brought up. Things were done when I was a kid because that's the way it was done. And somebody else told you how to do it. And so I'm not good when somebody tells me what to do.
Were you conscious of the fact that you would be doing it very differently? Not that you were going to have the food store and the TV show and all that, but
I just knew I wanted to surround myself with happy people and people that were positive, that believed in me. And I mean, I talk about good luck. And then I met Jeffrey. And I mean, I've never in the 60 years I've known him had him say to me, that's crazy. You don't want to do that. He's just positive and supportive and always says, if you think it's a good idea, just go do it. Just go do it. You'll be great at it.
Aw,
That's really sweet. It's really
aw,
great. I know. And you know him, so you know I'm right.
aw. I do know you're right. I do know, and he's exactly. Yeah, that Jeffrey only has one fault, as I can.
I
As
don't
far,
think he has one. What's the one?
oh, come on. Yes, you do. He's directionally challenged.
Oh, he's directionally challenged. Well, that's in his DNA.
Ina was for the sake of the rest of you. So Ina was away at one point, out of town, and I invited Jeffrey to come for dinner, which was fine, except this was out in the country, and everybody was very nervous that Jeffrey would not be able to find his way to my house, which he's been to about 400 times.
And do you know that we did a dry run before your dinner? Well, I
And
mean,
he made
in all
it.
fairness, Jeffrey's dyslexic, so I mean, it's not like he's not like an absent-minded professor. He just has an issue with that.
Right. That's not a flaw. It's in his DNA. He can't do anything about it.
Exactly.
But even that magical, wonderful relationship you write about had a moment. You reveal that this gorgeous marriage had a very, very rocky moment, several moments. And I mean, you know how I always describe the two of you, right? You're like two
No.
little, yeah,
How do you,
you're like two little koala bears sitting on a branch. The two of you could sit there and hug each other all day long. Um, but it turns out not always. Okay to talk about it now?
yeah, of course. Sure. So when I, we got married when I was 20, and when I turned 30, I bought Barefoot Contessa, and I think it was the 70s, and I know you know this era. Women were really trying to find their way as individuals, not as wives, and we had a very traditional relationship, which one would assume that we would at that time. He was the husband, I was the wife. He did the husband things like the checkbook, and I did the wife things like making dinner. And I just found those roles very I didn't mind making dinner. I just didn't want it to be expected that I would make dinner. And I found those roles really distressing. And then when I had my own business and I was in charge of something and I felt more confident, I found those roles even more distressing. And I just said to Jeffrey one day, when I'd been running the store for a couple of months, I said, I need to be on my own. And he said the most annoying thing. He said, if you feel like you should be on your own, you should be on your own.
Oh God,
even
so
even in that, he was wonderful. So we really we really spent maybe 4 months apart. And he was at the State Department. He was on a trip around the world, and we met in California when he came back, and we just sat and talked. And we just said, okay, what do you feel like you can't do because we're married? And he said, I don't feel like I could travel as much with my work as I'd like to. And I said, go do it. Just go do it. And there are things that I didn't feel were they. I didn't like that they were required of me because I was the wife, and we just changed what our expectations were. And I mean, when I wrote the book and I look back on it, I think, oh my God, that was the scariest thing I ever did. But when you're not happy, you have to do something. You have to shift gears. And fortunately, he was really willing to listen, which is incredible.
Did he read that chapter before you published it?
I didn't tell him what I was writing at all until about 2 days before I was giving it to my editor. And I said, I'd like you to read it for accuracy, not for comment. And I gave him the book. And because he's dyslexic, he reads in spurts. He doesn't read for a long period of time. And he sat down after lunch and didn't get up from the table until he finished the book around 7 o'clock at night.
Oh
it was quite extraordinary. I brought him snacks. I brought him things to drink. And he said he thought it was extraordinary. And of course, he knew every story, but he was totally fine with it.
No corrections?
One correction, there was somebody, a friend of his, I thought worked at the State Department. He worked at the World Bank. That was the only correction. And it was a friend of ours who had made a very, very simple, elegant dinner for us in Washington that shifted my idea of cooking from fancy to simple and elegant. And his name was Dick Erb. Yeah.
Did he want you to add anything, Ina?
Didn't suggest I add anything. That's what he is. He's just positive and supportive.
That of all of us, might I add, of all of us.
Yeah, that's true.
In regard to the part of in regard to this, the sort of darker parts of your life, your parents, and that very brief period with Jeffrey, how has writing about it and now talking about it made a difference for you? This is not something you spent a lot of time
Never,
discussing before this book.
never. I never looked back. I just kept moving forward, and I have to say, I have. Um, I mean, I think I tend to be tough on myself. That probably comes from my childhood. But I thought I was really surprised how willing I was to do scary things. But when I look back at all of the scary things I've done, throw away especially food store and not know what I was going to do next, and start TV when I thought that was really scary, I realized that it's the scary things that I've done that were really the making of my life. And I kind of have a little more respect for myself than I did when I started, which is not a bad thing to have.
No, it's not. Could I just point out that some of us have had that respect for you for a long time, but
Thank you.
welcome to the club,
Thank
Ina.
you.
Tell me about some other things that have happened since you wrote the book, and added those very human layers to your very public persona. What's it done to you to be a little more raw than you were before?
Well, I think people didn't know the rest of my story. They just knew the food part of my story. So I think I think it's important. Everybody thinks I live this perfect golden life. Walking around with Cosmopolitan, but I work really hard. I fight the fight. I don't let somebody take me off my game. If I have an editor who thinks I should do something I don't want to do, I just can't do it. So I end up, I like to get a large group of people together who are really smart around a table, and we talk about what we want to do. But at the end of the day, I'm the one who has to decide. And so I think that's what people don't see, and that's what I wrote about a lot in the book. Is how I trust my gut, and I go with it always.
And what you're saying is that in writing the book, you discovered things about yourself that you actually
Yeah,
liked that you
yeah,
hadn't thought
yeah.
about
It was really
before.
shocking. It was really shocking.
That's good. Tell me some other good things that have happened as a result of the book. Other connections you might have made.
Well,
People.
actually, I have Deborah Davis wrote the book with me. She did a lot of research with me, and did co-wrote it with me. And she's an incredible researcher, and she found people that I hadn't seen in 50 years, and reconnected with them, which is just incredible. And actually, one of the people I reconnected with was my brother. My brother had as difficult a time I had when we were kids, and we really lived very separate lives. And he actually didn't speak to my parents for about 20 years, and then writing the book, we started talking again, which was really nice. So that's been good to reconnect with my brother.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
One of the other things, so there's a change. So your life has changed in many ways. One of the ways it's changed is instead of doing a cooking show, you're now doing a talk show, an interview, a wonderful interview, in which you have guests that you interview and talk to. What parts of your soul does that open up? What's
Well,
new and different for you?
it I didn't realize it until I started doing it. It's I love being with people I love, and when I was doing when I do dinner parties on the cooking show, that's really what I love. But when I started doing Be My Guest, where one person was spending the day with me, and I was really connecting with them about what struggles they've had in their lives, what joys they've had, what they're really proud of. It is so satisfying, and I realized that if there's anything in my life that I've done to work out the issues of my childhood, it's be my guest. And I've connected with so many interesting people that have actually become really good friends, like Ann Patchett. I texted her, I DM'd her on Instagram. I knew we followed each other. And I DM'd her one day and said, would you ever come do and be my guest? And she DM'd me back and said, I have like one bar on my phone left. It's about to lose my phone, and I'm using it to write back and say, yes, I'd love to. And she's
Oh,
become a dear friend. So that kind of connection is just extraordinary to me. It's just such a joy.
who's on your guest wish list
Oh,
for that
so
show?
many. Oprah. I just had a conversation with Oprah. I think she'd be fantastic. I have Daniel Roseberry is coming in the spring. He's the head of Schiaparelli. He's a dear friend who's the head of the only American who's ever headed a Paris fashion house, couture house. Allison Janney is coming in the spring, who
Ooh,
I just adore. I just think she's brilliant, and her physical comedy just knocks me out.
right.
Who, I mean, my dream would be Meryl Streep would be fun. But I've had such great guests. I mean, Nathan Lane was a guest. He was wonderful. Eric Ripert from Le Bernardin was wonderful. Danny Myers from Union Square. So there are people from all different fields. And it's just been so joyful for me to get to know them. And those, for the people that are listening, those shows are all available on Max, so you can see them.
And I recommend them all. They're just so much
Thank
fun.
you.
And
Oh, thank you.
part of I think what we all love about you, both in person and on the screen, is you're very accessible. There doesn't seem to be a barrier there, and I'm not talking about celebritydom. I'm not talking
I
about
don't care about that. Yeah.
people autographs or something like that. But you're real. You're an accessible person. There
Thank you.
aren't shields in front of you. Do you think about that?
A friend of mine said she's always asked what she really like, thinking there's a TV person and there's a real person, and the answer is that she's exactly the way you think she is, except her language is a lot worse. Which you'll attest to that, right?
I will also. I would like to tell everyone what it is. People always say to me when I mention that you're coming for dinner, they'll say, "Oh my God, you're cooking for Ina Garten. Aren't you terrified?" And the answer is, she is so happy not to be cooking that I could make dog food and she'd be happy.
You can make baked beans out of a can. I'd be fine. I don't have to shop. I don't have to plan the menu. I don't have to cook. And I get to see you.
and there's that. Let me talk a little bit about cooking, and we're going to go to some wonderful questions that we do have from our audience. One of the things that's always fascinated me about you and your career is your grounding in science. I mean, for you, cooking is chemistry, right?
It is. Mm-hmm. I think every recipe is a science experiment.
This is not my grandmother's cooking. This is you saying this needs to go with this and this needs to. The other thing I love is you once told me that before you come up with a new recipe, you have a taste in your head, in your mouth, in your tongue. Where's the taste? I don't know where it is.
My head.
Explain that process. It's fascinating.
When I'm testing a recipe, I have a flavor and a texture in my head about what I want that recipe to be. So if I'm doing salmon in puff pastry, like a poached salmon in puff pastry, I know exactly what I want it to taste like when I'm done. So I'll just kind of read about it, or I'll think about it, and then I'll get a lot of ingredients and I'll just start cooking. And I'll keep going until I hear that little ping in my head that says, okay, bing, that's what I was looking for. And if I don't have that to start with, I never finish the recipe. I just keep going and going until I'm totally sick of it. I throw it out and go on to a different recipe.
Does one recipe ever lead to another?
Does one recipe lead to another?
Maybe a mistake, like a Post-it, like Post-its were a mistake.
Yeah, Post-its were exactly. I don't know that I've ever. I think what I've done is like I have mac and cheese, and I know that there's a way that the French make pasta, like a pasta gratin, by letting it sit overnight. And so I might take mac and cheese and do it as the French would do a pasta gratin. But I don't know that I've ever had like a disaster. That I had one time I had a disaster. I was having a dinner party and the dessert, I can't even remember what it was a disaster. And I was like, people are coming in like an hour. What am I going to do? And I rummaged through the refrigerator and I came up with creme fraiche, vanilla, and honey that I whipped together. And I did a big bowl of berries with vanilla creme fraiche on it. And it was so good. It ended up in a book. And it like took, like 3 minutes to make.
And I'm drooling, as I suspect is everybody in the audience right now. Is there, Ina, is there such a thing as perfect pitch in taste the way there is in music?
Well, the only thing I know is what I like, and I think I have much more. I demand much more in flavor and texture than most people do. If it's not like wow, I'm not happy. So I think and also I think unusual. I don't know that other people have the same flavor memory that I have. Like I can remember what something tasted like from 6 months ago, and I'll that'll stay with me. But maybe that's why I'm in the food business.
Yeah, exactly. Good taste as well as bad taste, or just
no, probably good taste.
You don't remember bad ones.
Well, I mean, if something had cilantro on it, I'll remember it forever.
There's that, yeah. That's someone said to me the other day, is there anything, Ina doesn't like? And I said, yes, cilantro. I know never to cook cilantro with cilantro when she's coming over.
And slimy things.
Slimy things, yes. I want to go now to a couple of questions from the audience.
Okay,
we'll come back to us. I think this is a wonderful question. Why was this the perfect time for you to write a memoir?
Well, I felt like I had written 13 cookbooks, and it was kind of time to branch out and do something bigger. And I think Be My Guest was part of that, branching out, doing something a little more than just food. And it was the pandemic. We were all home, and we were all thinking about what we were going to do with ourselves. And I had been asked a few times to do a memoir, and my friend Deborah and I started talking about it. And I just said to her, look, I don't know if it's going to be interesting, but I'm willing to do the scary thing, which is jump in, as long as you're willing to say, it's okay if I say, I don't want to do it anymore. I want to shelve the whole thing. And she said, fine. And so we dove in, and then I realized it was so much more interesting than I thought, going back and looking at my Washington days and how that influenced the next stage. So it was a good time for me.
Is there anything, I don't know the answer to this question. Is there anything that you've ever started that you haven't finished? Other than your career in the White House?
Yeah, there have been a lot of recipes.
Well, you said,
I'm
sorry, you did just say that. Yeah, there's some recipes you start and don't finish.
Well, you just start, you just start and you keep going and keep going. And then you just go, you know what? It wasn't a good idea. And just call it a day, start on something else. So, but any big projects that I started, well, there was a house in Washington, actually, that was way too expensive. And it was going to be incredibly expensive to redo. And at some point we just said, okay, it's time to get out. But I knew I'd bought it for a very good price, so I could get out without losing any money. And I did just fine.
Good. Phew. Okay,
exactly.
Here's a wonderful cooking question from our audience. Based on your experiences, what advice would you give to kids just learning how to cook?
I think that be willing to make mistakes. Just jump in and do it. The only way you learn how to cook is by doing it over and over and over again. And I think my best advice would be figure out what you love to eat. And if you love to eat it, it'll be fun to cook it. So if you love mac and cheese, make a lot of mac and cheese until you find out what your favorite mac and cheese is. Learn how to make a roast chicken. Everybody needs to know how to do that. Just pick a few things and just make them over and over and over again.
I've been having a very hard time with one of my granddaughters trying to get her to clean up as she cooks. I wonder if you have any advice in that regard.
Let it go.
I'm a little,
I'm the messiest cook, you know. It's a sign of creativity. That's all I tell myself.
yeah, and you
No,
can get away with it because you have a staff now. I
no,
know.
but still, I can trash a kitchen, and then I cook, and then when I'm done cooking, I clean the whole thing up.
Okay.
So there are
So
two methods.
why? Why does it go? Just bear with me on this one
Because
a little bit.
I can't be bothered cleaning when I'm cooking. Cooking's
Okay.
hard. I
Okay.
just want to focus on the cooking and I want to get it right. And then when I'm done, I can just get the dishes out of the way.
We all know what your big deal cocktail was during COVID. The Cosmo will live forever, and it gets bigger in every retelling. But we have a question for a mocktail. Do you have a recipe for a favorite mocktail? A lot of people are not doing alcohol these days.
Well, I mean, I think if you serve a mocktail like in a martini glass, it feels like a cocktail. So I have a great cranberry martini that I like to serve now, but you could serve it without vodka. You just do it with just shake cranberry juice and water and a little orange zest and orange peel in it, and you got and serve it in a martini glass. Should be great.
That sounds very good. I like that. Interestingly, a couple of our attendees who have read by the way, somebody wrote on the chat thing before we started, I just finished the book 2 hours ago. I can't wait to hear her. So for you who've just finished the book 2 hours ago, way to go. Way to go. I hope this adds to it. But several people have asked questions regarding what you went through in your momentary crisis, your brief but important breakup with Jeffrey, or almost breakup, and it has to do with marriage advice. Pause.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was a pause.
That's the answer before I even ask the question. The question is, any marriage advice for someone who's about to get married next year, and what is your best marriage advice for those that have been together since they were young but still have many years to go?
I think one of the things I learned through that process was that if you have a really strong relationship, it's like a stake in the middle of your life, and the stronger that is, the more freedom you have. I think I used to think that marriage was confining. You had to stay home and take care of each other and be a couple. But if you feel like you have a really strong stake in your life, you can go off and do your own thing and then come back. And I think it's good for people to do different things and then come back together, as long as you're always connected, as long as each person knows that the other person feels that they're the most important thing in their lives. And I've told the story. Jeffrey was on his way to meet the vice premier of China. It was literally on the way there. And I'd gone to some new doctor who gave me some crazy diagnosis that was bad. It turned out not to be true, but he just turned around and came back. And I thought, that was just an incredible thing to do, that he made me feel like there was nothing more important than me. And so when he was, he lived in Tokyo for a year and he lived in Hong Kong for a year, and we would go back and forth and we would write letters to each other. We always stayed connected, even though we weren't in the same place. And I think you just have to make an effort to do that.
And you've kept all those letters.
I kept all the letters.
I love
Isn't that crazy?
You kept all those letters. What are you going to do with them?
Well, I just used them for the book.
I understand that. Now what?
So I don't know. I still have them. And now they're cataloged. Now I know. I just threw them in a big box, but now they're in all organized. You never know when you want to read them.
Do you read them every now and then?
I haven't, but yeah, I mean, I did for the book, which was important.
For the book. Before the book.
Never looked at them. Never looked at them. Yeah, but I knew I had them.
Did Jeffrey keep yours?
No. There's one thing in the book that was really surprising because when I was going through the letters, I found a letter that he wrote to me when I was in high school or maybe college, and it said, "I want to take you to Paris," and it said, in the beginning we won't have any money, so maybe we'll go camping, and then later, hopefully, we'll have enough money to stay in a hotel, and then maybe if we're really lucky, we'll have enough money to rent an apartment in Paris. And both of us had no recollection of this letter whatsoever. And of course, that's what happened. We ended up camping when we were, I don't know, in our early 20s. Then we stayed in a hotel, and eventually we had an apartment. But when I went back to see this letter, the two of us were just astonished that it was something that was like deep in our brain that we wanted to do, and we did it. So it's kind of amazing.
You love Paris. I know you love Paris. I know your heart is there in so many ways. One of our participants would like to know what you recommend for someone to do when they go to Paris for the first time or maybe the second time.
Bring a pair of sneakers and walk everywhere. Just walk and stop at a cafe and have an omelet and a glass of champagne. Just keep walking. I think it's such. Adam Gopnik writes about Paris a lot, and for the New Yorker, and I love what he said. Everyday things in Paris are wonderful. You don't have to go to fancy restaurants. Just get a baguette and some cheese and fresh peach from the market, and just have a lunch sitting by the riverbank in La Seine.
That sounds very good right now.
It does, doesn't it?
Should I assume you'll be in Paris for the holidays as usual?
I will. Yeah. It's just magical. It really is wonderful.
So you fly to Paris, you get there, you get to your apartment. What's the first thing you do?
We drop our bags and we go to a little cafe that we always go to and have what they call a crème et tartine, which is a coffee with, like a cappuccino and a bread with butter and jam. Just heaven. And just hang out there. And then we go home and take a long nap.
That sounds really good. Really good.
That's great.
All right. I'm going to get to some cooking nitty gritty right now.
Okay.
Question.
You think I know the answer?
Yeah, you do know the answer. Is there really a difference between salts, diamond crystal versus sea salt or regular table salt? This is important.
Oh, huge difference. And you know how you will always remember it is take all your salts out and take a cutting board and just put a little mound of salt on each one of the salts, and then lick your finger and taste it. Taste each one going right down the line, and you will never forget how different salts are. Like regular table salt has like chemicals in it to keep it free flowing, and it's really kind of harsh. Whereas on the other extreme, like fleur de sel, which is French sea salt, is very kind of briny and light, and I use it for finishing. But I use diamond crystal kosher salt because it's I don't know, it's just the right amount of saltiness. But I there's flaked sea salt, which is wonderful on it's kind of crunchy, which is great. Well, Lynn, I've told you about beurre de Barat, right?
Oh, yes.
French butter.
Could I just tell everyone that I got this urgent message from Ina this summer, which was I had to go to a certain store and I had to buy a certain kind of salt, this French salt, and my life would be completely changed.
French butter with sea salt. Yeah,
French butter
with flaked
and my
sea
life
salt.
would be completely changed if I
and
did
was
that.
It?
Well, it is pretty good. I sent one of the kids over to get it, and it really was quite good. Yeah. And what's special? Let's share with everybody what that salt is.
It's called
butter. Sorry.
It's called beurre, Beurre, which is butter in French. De Barat, Baratte, and it comes in different kinds, but the one I like is with flaked sea salt because it's kind of crunchy and salty, and it's just French salt, French butter. It's just fabulous.
It does make that morning toast pretty special. I will buy that. Yes, you're right. Another food question. What is your favorite comfort food?
A bowl of oatmeal with maple syrup. It's the best, and a little milk. It's just like if I'm cranky and I'm home alone or something, that's what I'll have for dinner. It's the best.
I'd also
What's yours? Lynn, what's
Well,
yours?
I'm a big oatmeal person. Pea soup is one of
Pea
mine.
soup. Yeah,
Pea
that's a good
soup,
one.
pea soup that I make. I love pea soup. But I was just going to say, in terms of comfort food, and you always crank it up a bit. Um, you made for me during COVID your truffle macaroni,
Oh, truffle
truffle
mac and cheese.
mac and cheese. Oh
Yeah,
my gosh, Ina.
thank
That
you.
here it is, folks. It's COVID. And Ina invites me over for dinner in the middle of that winter. And it was about 30 degrees outside. And I said, and she said, we're going to eat outside. We have heaters. We're going to eat outside. And I said, I'm really very happy to avoid COVID. But I would also like to avoid pneumonia. Could we put this off for a couple of weeks? So we did put it off for a couple of weeks. And you provided me, because it was COVID and you were doing that. That was the thing where we all were doing separate hors d'oeuvre platters for
Oh
every
yeah,
individual.
remember?
I
Yeah.
had my own entire bowl of truffle mac and cheese.
That's exactly right. Yeah, we couldn't pass things back and forth, right?
Right,
So
right.
everybody had their own dinner.
So that's become my favorite comfort food, which I
Oh,
think is,
that's so great. Thank
yeah,
you.
yeah, I like that. Somebody would like to know what motivates you every day to cook, even when you're not in a good place and don't feel like it. How do you get it up to do that?
I have to say, I always feel like it. My dream day is I wake up in the morning and I say to myself, what do I feel like doing today? And what I feel like doing is walking across the lawn, going to the barn, meeting my guys, and cooking that day. And the best part is I get to do it all the time. I
The
just
best part
always
the
feel,
best part for us is that we sometimes get to celebrate with her and enjoy
yeah,
it.
even better.
Now, one more good question. If cooking had never been your creative outlet, what other pursuit do you think could have filled the void?
When I was living in Washington and working in the White House, I did two other things just to because I thought it was fun creatively. One was teaching myself how to cook, and the other one was renovating old houses. And I think I could have either been gone into the food business or gone into real estate. And I just, food business ended up being what I did. And I still do real estate, but I do it for the fun of it. So I think those are the two things I love doing.
I've asked you this question before, and I'm going to do it again because if you're like me, you have no recollection of anything that
I have
happened in
no
the near
recollection.
past. One of the favorite things I like to ask people is if I woke you up in the middle of the night and I said, who are you? One word, what would be the answer? Define yourself.
In one word?
One word. In other words, cook, chef, nice
Oh,
person, wife. One word.
wow. um, I don't know, fun.
I'll take fun.
Is fun good? I
Fun's
mean,
good.
I like doing things that are fun. And I love people who want to do it with me.
And it's why people have so much fun following you. It's exactly what it's all about.
Thank you. Thank you.
That's that's the magic word. You said before, Ina, and you've said it often. I always look ahead, and in the book you say, "I always look ahead. I never look back."
Yeah.
Um, things that and you talk about the things that you've done in your life that you didn't realize you had the courage to do, which is quite extraordinary, and why so many of us admire you so much. But
Thank you.
when you say I always look ahead, I never look back. Look ahead right now at American cooking, at your life. What's next?
I really don't know what's next. I kind of do what I'm doing today. I do it as well as I can do it. And I'm going to do tomorrow what I need to do tomorrow. And things just happen. Things come up and I go, well, that's kind of interesting. Let me look at that and decide if it's interesting to add on. But I love having fewer things to do and do them really well. And so right now I'm writing cookbooks. I'm going to do a design book after the next cookbook, which I think will be a real challenge. And I love doing Be My Guest, which is fabulous. And if something else comes along, we'll see if it's interesting.
How about the bigger picture American cuisine? we've in our lifetimes, you and me, we've seen a huge change in the way. Again, I loved my grandmother dearly, and she was a wonderful cook, but she didn't, write bestsellers, and it was a different it was a different time.
Yeah.
What's next in American cuisine?
I don't actually, I'm not connected to a bigger cuisine out there. I'm connected with what makes people feel good. And what makes people feel good is generally what a remembered flavor. So, like, to me, the best recipe is like, we all remember Lipton's onion soup dip mix, which, was used to be served with potato chips. And I want to say, how can I make that into something real? So I saute the onions and I add sour cream and spices. And so I'm making onion dip, but it's the real thing.
And
And so
it's really, really good.
it's really good. Actually had people say they made it, they ate the entire thing before the party, and then they had to make it again. And I think, well, that was a great success. So I like things that remind you of, lemon chicken with orzo and red wine braised short ribs. When you read the title of the recipe, you go, oh, that sounds really good. It's not some Asian spice with a Indian food from, with an Australian ingredient. I like real food that sounds good and it tastes absolutely great and it feels good to eat it.
And with that, folks, I want to say thank you to Ina, and I hope you all have good dinner plans for tonight because I, for one, am starving. Ina, thank you very
You're
much.
The best, Lynn.
Thank you
so
for
much.
Writing the book. To all the participants, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for coming.
And those of you, I'm obligated to say by the BNN folks, those of you who purchased a ticket that included Be Ready When the Luck Happens with a signed book plate, the book will be delivered to you in 8 to 10 business days. In addition, please know that extra copies for all of your friends and all of their families of Be Ready When the Luck Happens are available 24/7, of course, on barnesandnoble.com and at your local B&N store. Folks, this has really been fun.
Thank you so much for everybody for coming. And Lynn, you're the best.
Thanks to all of you.
Can't wait to have fun.